Hello, my fellow gnomes, and welcome back to our Tower Defense series with episode 9, I believe. Now, previously we had this pretty basic little slinger dude set up, we've got our health set up, and things are coming together, but things are a bit boring with just a single slinger. So if I pan the camera around here, behind these trees, you'll see I've got some brand new towers to show you guys. We've got our slinger, who we've already met. We've got our magician fellow, who's got a staff and he's in a purple colour. And then we've got our brute as well. So just the 3 different towers, but they're kind of like your classic classes, I suppose, with a melee, a ranged, and a magic option. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to add these guys into our game world. So what we need to do is select them all and drag them down into our towers folder over in replicated storage. That'll take them out of the workspace. And now we really need to improve our UI because we've got this horrible little button at the bottom of the screen, which isn't really too appealing, is it? So what I'm going to do, if I go to Start a GUI, to Game GUI, and I think I'm just going to delete this spawn button. It's horrible. I'm going to delete it. And I'm going to add in a brand new frame, which puts it up in the top left of the screen like so. And then I'm going to set about sort of positioning that to where I want it to be. So size-wise, it gives it a default value of 100 by 100 pixels. I don't want that. I want it to be 0.1 or 10% of the way horizontally. 0 pixels, because we're just going to use that relative value. And then we'll use 1, so it's 100% of the height, and then 0, no extra pixels. So when we press enter, then we have this little bar here that appears on the left-hand side of the screen. We're going to make this invisible. We don't really want to be able to see it, because then inside of this frame, we're going to add in individual buttons for each tower. So let's just rename the frame from frame to towers, and then inside of here, we'll add in we're going to add in a button. We could use a text button, but I think I'm going to use an image button. So we'll add in one of those, and we see it appears in the top left like so. And now I could position all these manually, but to help me out a little bit, I can use something called a UI list layout. And when I add that in, and then if I was to duplicate this button and add another button in, you'll see as I add more buttons, they'll again get nicely tiled for me without me having to worry about positioning all of them. So I'll delete all of these for a second. And how big do I want it to be? Well, I want it to be mostly filling the bar. I don't want it to be quite full, so I'm going to make it 0.8. So it's mostly fills it. And then for the height, well, I actually do want this to be square. But if I put 0.8 again for the height, what's going to happen is it's going to fill it all like that, which obviously I don't want. So in order to make it just use the 0.8 value of the width and then copy that for the height, I can change this size constraint property here and change it from XY to XX. And when I do that, it'll ensure that it stays perfectly square. So at the moment at this resolution, it's 129 by 129 pixels. But if I was to change that and move it in a bit, it'll go down to 81 by 81, but it will still keep that sort of ratio, which is what we want. So once we've done the size, we don't actually have to set the position because that's going to be handled by our UI list layout. So let's see if we can center this a bit. So fill direction, vertical, yeah. Horizontal layout, alignment. Let's make this center. So it's in the middle. It's got a little bit of margin each side. And then vertical, we'll center that as well. So it's going to be in the middle for us, just like so. And I don't really like these black borders it's got around the edge. So we can remove them if we click the button and the borders, where are they? Border size pixel, set that to 0. And then that'll get rid of the border. And then if we want it to be a little bit rounded, we can add in a UI, what is it called? A UI corner object. And when we add that in, we get some little rounded corners, which looks a little bit prettier, I think. And then inside of this tower's frame as well, maybe we should have a little title text label. So we'll add in a text label, and we'll just call this one title. And then we're going to make this the same size as well. So it's going to be 0.8 of the way across, 0, and then maybe not the same height. So maybe we'll make this like 0.4 or something, and 0. And then we'll change it to relative XX, and then it'll look like that. We're going to want that UI corner, so we'll copy that, paste it into the title, so it's nicely rounded off again. And then down for the text, we'll make the text just say towers. We'll change the font to, what did we use before? Oswald. That looks pretty nice. And then make sure the text is scaled so it's nice and big. And then once we've done that, we actually want it to be above. So we don't want it to be below the images. So we'll make sure that the layout order is set to 0 for the title label. And then the button, we want the layout order to be set to 1. And so when we do that, it appears below. And they probably want a little bit of padding between these two items as well. So if I click the UI list layout, and I have this padding option that appears, and I'm just going to set, I've got two options, scale and offset, or pixel values. And I'm just going to set an offset of 10. So there's going to be a 10 pixel gap between them. There we go. That's a bit nicer. And so then now if I was to duplicate this image button, I can then have a few towers appear on the left like this. There we go. Looks pretty nice and neat. So I'm going to delete all these extra ones for now. And I'm just going to name this one. I'll name this one template, because we'll be copying it later. But we are going to need some images for our buttons. So I've actually already got an image. I'll just show you if I paste this in here. I've got an image like that. Looks pretty cool for my slinger. But you're going to need some images too. So what I would usually do is I would take one of my slingers, say, into the workspace. And then you can add in sort of like a green screen is a good idea. So to the skybox, you can add in a green screen, something like this. You can move your character to where you want him. Although you wouldn't want green for this guy. You'd probably want to do it with a blue screen instead, actually. There we go, something like that. So you've got a good bit of contrast. And then if you delete the base plate and you head into the animation editor, import your animation in, and then so he's sort of in a posed position. And then what you can do is take a screenshot of where you want him and paste that into your editing program. So I use paint.net for this, and I use the chroma key plugin and just put it on a sort of square shaped canvas. I think this is 512 by 512. Get it nicely positioned, and then you can get rid of the background. And then all you need to do to upload it is head to Roblox, go to the create page, go to decals, and then you can go and upload it. And once you've done that, you'll then have the ID ready to use that you can then paste into the decal object that we've got right now. So what we're going to need to do, before we get too ahead of ourselves here, let's get rid of some of this stuff and move our slinger back into the towers folder. Is now we actually want each tower, obviously, to have their own image. We don't want to just manually create them here. So what we're going to do, we're going to open up now, finally doing a bit of scripting, open up our game controller local script. And inside of there, you might remember down at the bottom, we had this, here it is, GUI.spawn.activated. And that's just manually using that old spawn button, but we've got rid of that now. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to loop through the towers folder inside of replicated storage. So delete this, and I'm going to say for I tower in pairs towers, using that towers variable, which is for this folder, and we're going to get the children, and then we're going to loop through all of them. And when we loop through, we're going to create a duplicate of this template button that we created. So we'll say local button equals GUI.towers.template, and then we're going to clone it. So get a new copy, and then we'll just set some properties for this cloned button. So the button.name will now be equal to the tower.name, and then the button.parent will be equal to GUI.towers. So that's going to add in 3 new buttons when they run. And then we can say button.activated. So we're creating an event now inside of the loop. So this means that every single button that we create will have its own separate event-based function for whenever they click that button. So we connect that into a function. And then all we're going to do is we're going to say add placeholder tower, and we use that function that we used before. And instead of manually typing out the name like Slinger, like we did before, now we can say whatever the tower.name is, and we'll send it to that function. So let's enable the output, and then we'll click to play. And when we do so, we should now have, we've got a load of UI on the screen. I think one of these is our template. So if I go into the players folder and into the player GUI, into the games UI, into the towers folder, we can now see all of those buttons have been created, including the template. So let's just delete the template while the game's running. And now I've just got 3. We haven't got images for any of them just yet. But if I was to click one of them, it's okay. So that is the magician, and we can add in the magician. We can add in the slinger. We can add in the brute. But clearly we're going to need to add some images for them now. Okay, so if we have another look at these towers, I'll just drag them back into the workspace for a second so we can have a look at them. And I've already actually, inside of each of these, I've already gone and got an animations folder. So they've got an animations folder like we created for the slinger with an attack and an idle. But what I want to do now is I want to create a new folder, new configuration folder, and we'll just call this config. And inside of this, I'm going to want to have a few values because I want each different tower. I want to have different animations, but I also want them to behave a little bit differently as well. I don't want them all to just be the same. So it's in this config folder that we're going to actually set those differences. So inside of here, I'm going to add an int value. And the first of this is going to be called cooldown. So how long they wait between each attack. And then we'll copy that and we'll name the next one damage. How much damage they deal out on a hit. And then one more, which is going to be the range. How big a range they can attack people or find mobs to attack in. And the final thing we're going to add into the config is a decal. We're just going to name this one image, and the texture property is going to be those images that you created. So I'm now going to get my IDs from the website where I've uploaded them. So if I just head and open up my toolbox into my inventory and go to my images, you can actually see I've already got those 3 images there already. So this one is for the slinger. So all I need to do is I can right click, copy the asset ID, paste it into the texture, and there we go, we've got that one. And then I just need to copy that for each one. But before we do that, I'm going to need to set these values, aren't I? So the slinger this is for. Now his damage, I don't think he deals a huge amount of damage, probably only like 10. But cooldown, he has a pretty quick cooldown, so probably only a second of cooldown. And then range is sort of mid-tier unit, so let's give him a range. Sorry, that was the cooldown. Let's give him a range of 10. And then once I've set all of them, I can copy this config folder. And now I'm going to place it into my magician. Now the thing about the magician is he's going to have a really big range. So I'm going to give him a range of 25. but he doesn't deal much damage. So he only deals 5 damage. And I'm probably going to give him quite a big cooldown as well. So maybe we'll give him a cooldown of sort of 3 seconds. So he's quite a bit slower than the slinger, but with the idea that maybe you can upgrade him later on. So that's the cooldown, damage, and range set, and then I just put in my image. And we just repeat the process for our brute. Cooldown we will set to... Cooldown we'll set to 2, so he's sort of in the middle of the magician and the slinger. Damage is going to deal out a lot of damage. I think we'll give him 25 damage. But the catch is going to be he's not going to have a very big range. So the slinger had a range of 10. Let's halve this just to 5. So very small range indeed. And then we'll just get that ID and paste that in for the image. So now we've set all of these values, let's actually access them. So first of all, we'll drag this folder back into replicated storage. There we go. And then we'll head into our, before we do, let's disable this button. So the template button, we don't need this to be visible. So we'll set the visibility to false and it will disappear. And then inside of our game controller script, let's access that config folder. So local config is equal to the tower wait for child config. And then we can set the button dot image equal to config dot image dot texture. So that, remember, it was the texture property of the decal. And so we'll set that to the image. And once we've done that, we actually need to make it visible again because we disabled the visibility of the template. So visibility will equal true. And that should be pretty much all we need to do actually in here, because all the other values like our damage and so on are handled from our server script. So if we head to server script service, open up our tower module, and over here we've got this max distance variable. So we can actually change this now. So instead of having max distance in here, we'll delete that. And we're actually going to have it as a parameter of this function. So we'll just put range. And then we'll swap that out with that. So instead of max distance, that becomes range. And then we're going to feed it into the function from our main attack function. So we'll create a new variable down here called config to access that configuration folder. So it'll be new tower.config. And then the parameter that we'll send, the second range parameter, is simply config.range, and we want the value of it. So that's sending the range. And then finally for the damage, down here we put deal out 25 damage. We'll change that to be config.cooldown.value. Sorry, not cooldown, .damage.value. And then instead of waiting 1 second, you see I was getting ahead of myself, we're going to want to wait config.cooldown.value. So there is where we're going to wait for that cooldown. Now before, when we were doing this, we were actually just waiting every time. But we don't want the cooldown to apply if they haven't got a target. So let's move this here. So it's actually happening only if they find a target. And if they don't find a target, well, we're just going to try and attack again anyway. But we are going to want to have a short wait. So this doesn't want to be too intensive. We'll just wait, say, 1/10 of a second, 0.1. So now when we play the game, we should have all of our config folders in action. And, oh, I've got a problem here. I've got a problem in my script with an error. Visibility is not a valid member. Let's see, where have we gone wrong here? Oh, it's the .visible, not visibility. So change that from visibility to .visible. There we go. So now when I spawn in, we've got all our 3 different units lined up. They look pretty smart, I think. And we can add in a slinger if we want. And he's going to deal the appropriate amount of damage. And if we add in a magician, we'll put him up on this hill here. And eventually when it comes round, it's going to wait a little while. But he's not going to deliver as much damage as the slinger. So let's see. There we go. So he only delivers half the damage. And if we add in our brute over here. So the magician killed him again. We'll add in another brute over here on the corner. And so he's going to deal a lot of damage. He'll clean up any of these that the slinger doesn't get. There we go. So he's bonked one on the head. But obviously he's got that cooldown, so he can't get all of them. So we're going to have to add in another slinger and he can finish them off. So this is great, and we've got all our units down here. But I've probably got like 10 already. And there's nothing to stop me from just spamming down tons and tons of units at this point. All over the show. And that's not really what you want. You want probably to have some kind of limit to how many you can place. This is starting to get a bit ridiculous if I had this many in my game. So if I want to add a limit, it's actually really easy. So I'll hit stop. And we're going to do a really quick check just using our local script. We could do it on the server side if we wanted, but we'll just do it in our local script for now. So right at the top, after this rotation variable, we'll add a new one. And we'll call this local placed towers. And then we'll just set this equal to 0 initially, because obviously when the game starts, they won't have placed any towers. And then another one called max towers. So the maximum amount we want them to be able to place. And we're going to set this to a cap of 10. So then down at near the bottom, where we have our button generator script, when we detect when it's activated, when they click the button, we'll do a quick check. So we'll say if the place towers is less than the maximum allowed towers, then we'll add a placeholder. But if they've hit the limit, then we're not going to bother. And then all we need to do is change the value of the placed towers. So we can do this after they've sent the remote event. I think that's down here. Yeah, so just over here. After I suppose, after I've sent the event, we'll just say place towers plus equals 1. So equal to the current amount plus another 1. And as well as doing this, we might want to change the text so they can actually know how many they've placed. So as soon as we've got this towers title label here, how about we add on to the end of this towers and how many they've placed. So before we do that loop where we set everything up, here we go, on line 65, how about we set how many they've placed so far. So we'll say GUI.towers. And we named it title, that text label, .text, and we'll set the text equal to towers, which is what it currently says now anyway. But then we'll add like a colon on the end, and we'll add on ... place towers ... and slash, so out of ... and max towers. So it will start off saying towers 0 out of 10. And then we're going to want to change that every time they place another one, every time we increase the value. So when we increase the place towers value, just down here, right below it, we're going to paste in that line. Exactly the same line, but we just want it to update now. So now let's click play. And we see as soon as I spawn in, it now says towers 0 out of 10. It's all a bit squashed in, so maybe I want to add in a space quickly. I could just do that by adding a space after the colon like so, and a space here as well. So that's going to add in a little bit more room, hopefully. Won't look quite as squished in. There we go, it looks a bit better. So then I can add in my towers, and every time I place one, now it says 1 out of 10. And if I add in a few more, the number's going to go up pretty fast. And once I hit that limit, so I'm now at 6, and I place 8, 9, and the 10th one, it's going to go up to 10. And if I click again, nothing's going to happen. Look, I can't place any more because I've reached my limit of towers. So I can't spam the whole map with them. That's it now. I'm stuck at 10. So there we go, guys. that brings us to the end of episode 9. Hopefully, you've been able to follow along and your own tower defense game is coming along too. So, thank you very much for watching. If you found this video helpful, please leave a like, it really helps the channel, and why not even consider subscribing. I'll see you all in the next episode. Goodbye!